The Conservatives' Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Richard Fuller. We had your opposite number in that seat earlier on. And we were talking about what fair taxation looks like. What's the Tories' policy on what fair taxes are?
So fair taxation is where the government decides what it really needs to do, has a plan for doing that effectively, and then asks taxpayers to fund it.
Yeah, and that's what Labour says they are doing. They're saying that fairness is at the heart of what they plan to do in the autumn budget. We await that with bated breath. What would you do right now to try and cover the costs of more expensive stuff like welfare and the NHS and perhaps paying doctors more money and everything else?
Well, you just pointed a couple of things which clearly indicate how this Labour government is not managing the state very well. Who gives someone a 30% pay increase and says, don't mind what you do, just have 30% more?
You're talking about the doctors?
The doctors. You should have asked for more productivity improvements. Who, in their first year, says they're going to cut the winter fuel payments for the elderly, say they're going to get rid of the two-child welfare cap, then say that they're going to put in rather modest steps of welfare, and then fail to do those.
They haven't been specific on the two-child benefit cap, and they may well yet do that as they reveal their strategy for children.
The policy is being run by the Labour backbenchers now. So on welfare, it is quite clear that when the Conservatives and Kemi Badenoch said, we're here to help, we realise you have to make some difficult choices on welfare. We, the Conservative Party, will support you in making those cuts and more. That the Chancellor made a decision to turn, well, Prime Minister actually made a decision to turn his back on that, undercut the Chancellor and said, I've got to look after my backbenchers. So the pressure from Labour now is further and further to those on welfare, to protect welfare. And that means that people who go out every day to work hard, to make things for themselves, for their country, to build businesses, they're the ones who are going to have to pay for Labour's weakness.
The fact is that child poverty has long been a national embarrassment in this country. For a country as wealthy as ours, we're terrible at dealing with child poverty. Yet the Conservatives would still keep the two-child benefit cap?
So this is one of the things. So one of the criticisms of why we're so sharp in our criticism of Rachel Reeves' welfare reforms wasn't just because they didn't provide enough savings, because they weren't thought through. Under Ian Duncan Smith, the Conservative Party put together, and under the coalition then enacted, a series of changes of welfare which were focused upon getting people into work. And then we backed that up by introducing the national living wage, with the government intervening to increase wages of those on the lowest incomes so they'll get more. And we increase income tax threshold. That was a model to get children and adults out of poverty based on people working to contribute to the state rather than sitting back and relying on the state.
But leading to a decade or more of austerity and not exactly contributing to the growth in the economy that people so
Two different things, right? So these policies cost money. Increasing the living wage, they were costs to the Treasury, cutting back on the thresholds. They were costs to the Treasury. It was a time where we said, yes, we have got to get the public sector to work more efficiently. If you look at how the public sector productivity changed between 2010 and 2019, it's the only period of sustained high increases in public sector productivity in this country. Didn't happen under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, didn't happen under 29-24. We have to get back to that mentality of saying to the state, live within your means and treat every pound of taxpayers' money you take really carefully. That's the job of my opposite number, Chief Secretary of the Treasury. He needs to do a better job on that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we got onto a conversation about what fair taxation looks like. And look, let's couch this in terms of not many people earn over £100,000. It's roughly 3 times the average salary. But that said, it's more than 1 million. And when people do reach that threshold, they're suddenly paying 60% in real terms tax. Is that fair, in your opinion?
Well, it clearly isn't fair that someone suddenly faces such a large increase in the marginal rate of tax, whatever income. It's not an efficient tax system. And so you have to look at ways to get rid of those inefficient taxes. There are other taxes which aren't particularly efficient in terms of getting economic growth.
Like what else? What else would you change?
Well, stamp duty land tax, for example, when people move home. I mean, most economists would say that.
Stamp duty on share trading as well. A lot of people point to that as it makes some money for the Exchequer, but without it, the Exchequer would make even more on trading. Yeah,
so the Chancellor should be going through all of these tax measures if she really is committed to growth and be fearless. When she talks about fairness and she talks about economic growth, she has to recognise that sometimes those things don't completely align. So if she's going to look for economic growth, she has to look to eliminate some of the tax inefficiencies that inhibit growth. But I do appreciate that she's got a series of things to work on. She has created...
A series of things they inherited, to be fair.
No, actually, no, that's not true. because she said she cleaned them up in October. Yes, I'm not saying that everything was great, trust me. There were problems, right? But the Chancellor was very, very clear last October. She went around saying, I've found this 22 billion black hole. Nobody really believed her.
Yeah.
She then said in October budget, I've fixed it. I've fixed the foundations, we're going ahead. I will not come back for taxes again. Once in a generation tax increase. Guess what? Less than 12 months later, we already know she's coming back for another big tax take. That is a consequence of her own making, not something she inherited.
Yeah, and the tax, the primary lever that she pulled was increasing national insurance contributions on employers.
Yes.
And we've seen the jobs market subsequently slow down. What do you make of the Governor of the Bank of England pointing to that possibility that it may encourage the Bank of England to cut interest rates next month, even when inflation is running hot at 3.4%?
Yeah, well, look, sometimes cutting interest rates is a sign of strength. It means that the Bank of England's got inflation under control, the economy's growing, and we can continue to cut interest rates to let people have cheaper mortgages. This is a cut, the Bank of England is saying, this is a cut for weakness, the weakness of the government, as you rightly point out.
Should they do it then, or not?
Well, look, we've allowed the Bank of England to make those decisions. They run the monetary policy. There are reasons for doing that. But I think the fundamental takeaway for the public is this cut in interest rates is not done from a position of strength, and therefore be cautious when it is made, because you don't know what the consequences are likely to be in the longer term.
Let's talk positions of strength. Having policies is a position of strength, isn't it? Are we starting to get more policy ideas from the Conservatives here? Because for the past year or so, we haven't had an awful lot of meat on those bones.
Well, first of all, the public well and truly put us in the sin bin at the election, right? They said, we don't care who runs the country, we just don't want the Conservatives. So for 12 months after that, last 12 months, they haven't really wanted to hear from the Conservative Party. But you're right, from the point of view of developing policy, we need, even though the election is a long way away, and we won't firm them up until obviously the election campaign, we put our manifesto together.
Yeah.
We do want to hear a bit more from Kemi about the principles we have. She's been very clear she's on the side of the makers in society. She wants to have a society that's based on self-reliance, a society where the state is rewired so it's much more effective in delivering services at lower cost for the taxpayer. Doing that work takes time, but yes, I think in the months and weeks ahead, certainly a conference and thereafter, you'll start hearing a bit more policies on a lot of areas.
Because you'll be keeping an eye on reform in the opinion polls, who are
and Labour and the Liberal Democrats and everything. So reform's strength is people's frustration with politics, and it is palpable that people feel the politicians aren't up to the mark. That's why the Conservative Party, having received such a severe red card in the last election, we've got to do that hard work.
And Tories obviously moving over to reform. We've seen that all the time.
And Labour and Tories moving to different parties, because we need the Conservative Party. Our job in the Conservative Party is to learn the lessons, hear what people said, and do the hard work that Kemi Badenoch said, to say, think fundamentally about how we want to present ourselves in the next election so we can regain the trust, not just in the Conservative Party, but that politics can be an effective way for people to achieve outcomes.
Richard Fuller, thank you.
Thank you.